Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Air Marshal A.K. Bharti confirms that all Indian military bases and systems remain fully operational, ready to undertake any further missions if necessary, in a media briefing following the ceasefire agreement with Pakistan this weekend. Russia vows to an adequate response to Poland after it closed Moscow's consulate in the city of Krakow over an alleged involvement in a sabotage attack on a mall in Warsaw last year. Voting ends in the Philippines' high-stakes midterm elections set to decide the power struggle between the rival dynasties backed by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and former President Rodrigo Duterte, jailed in The Hague on an ICC warrant. Ivory Coast's opposition leader Tidjane Thiam resigns as party leader after being barred from the October presidential election. However, he stresses he will still lead efforts to win the election. And Indian cricketer Virat Kohli announces his retirement from Test cricket days after captain Rohit Sharma bid goodbye to the red ball format. Hello and welcome. Our top focus continues to remain on the India-Pakistan ceasefire. We look at the African nations who reacted to the truce agreement and have also weighed on since the Pahalgam terror attack, which triggered India's military response against Pakistan's terror machinery. As India and Pakistan announced a ceasefire agreement on Saturday, after intense diplomatic efforts, African nations welcomed the move and called for restraint on both sides. Egypt was among the first to respond, calling the country agreement, quote-unquote, a positive step towards stability in South Asia. In a statement, Egypt's foreign ministry urged both countries to stay committed to the deal and also to build mutual trust and to work toward peace. Cairo also reiterated its support for peaceful conflict resolution. It urged continued dialogue to settle international disputes. Egypt also called on Washington to push for a ceasefire in Gaza to end the Palestinian suffering. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar spoke directly to the Egyptian Foreign Minister. Jaishankar apprised him of the recent developments, and he also emphasized the need for zero tolerance against terrorism. The two foreign ministers also discussed economic cooperation between the two nations. Algeria, too, welcomed the India-Pakistan ceasefire. The Algerian foreign minister expressed hope that the ceasefire agreement would be a step toward lasting peace, and it would also strengthen regional security. Other African nations, too, had weighed in when Pakistan-based terrorists killed 26 civilians in Kashmir. We have been telling you about it. Angola was among the first international countries to condemn it. Jaishankar, back then, also continued his diplomatic outreach and spoke to counterparts of Sierra Leone and Somalia. India has time and again clarified that its mission is against terrorism and not the Pakistani people. As border tensions simmer, the focus now shifts to whether the ceasefire holds and if regional peace can be built through collective diplomacy. And now shifting focus to some big developments from South Africa. The first group of white South Africans who have been granted refugee status by Washington are heading to the United States. As per reports, a group of 49 white South Africans departed their homeland on Sunday for the United States on a private charter plane. The group, which includes families and small children, is due to arrive at Dulles International Airport outside Washington.
The routes we have in the application. The flight is coming from Texas via Dakar and then to OR Tambo. At 8 o'clock they take off Dakar and then they go to Washington, Dallas airports in Washington, D.C. and then to Texas again.
Now, the crackdown on immigration has been a key agenda for U.S. President Donald Trump. His administration has paused other refugee programs, halting arrivals from Afghanistan, Iraq, and most of sub-Saharan Africa. But it has fast-tracked the applications of white South Africans. Why? Because, as per Trump, white South Africans are facing discrimination by South Africa's black majority. In February, Trump issued an executive order accusing South Africa's black-led government of racial discrimination against the Afrikaner group, who are mostly descendants of Dutch settlers. He cut all aid to South Africa and announced a program to offer them relocation to America. At the heart of Trump's accusation is South Africa's land reforms, meant to redress inequalities entrenched under the former apartheid system. Now, Trump has claimed it would allow the government to seize Afrikaners' agricultural property without compensation. However, the South African government has called this misinformation. It has repeatedly insisted that no land will be forcibly seized under the law. In South Africa, around 70% of land is owned by white minority, who make up around 7% of the total population. The Trump administration insists the South African government is pursuing racist anti-white policies. His views are believed to be echoing his ally, tech billionaire Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa, has repeatedly accused the South African government of encouraging a white genocide, an accusation Pretoria strongly denies. Now, in the past few months, South Africa-US ties have taken a plunge. The US also expelled the South African ambassador, avoided G20 meetings, and imposed high tariffs. The South African government has hoped for dialogue. President Ramaphosa spoke to Trump last month and said that both leaders will meet soon to diffuse tensions. However, the US refugee program has moved fast. The White House has reportedly said this is the first in a much larger scale relocation effort. The South African government said there was no justification for them being relocated, but added it wouldn't stop them and respected their freedom of choice. Many in South Africa are puzzled by claims that white South Africans are persecuted and meet the requirements to be relocated as refugees. Even the group's leading white South African cause have rejected it. But reports say that at least 70,000 white South Africans are interested in the plan and are thankful to the US president.
We've been forgotten. It's very hard for us to travel. It's very hard for us to get visas. So to suddenly hear that a country like the United States is offering us refugee status was a really big deal. And I was so excited. I felt so relieved. It just felt like a lifeline.
The migration underscores how racial divides still shape South African politics. Even 30 years after apartheid, the move reflects unresolved tensions and unequal narratives about victimhood. What will be the implications of this exodus for South Africa? For more on this, we have with us Ayanda Sishiwigzel, political commentator and journalist, who is joining us live from Johannesburg. Thank you for being with us, Ayanda.
Thank you very much, Alyson, and good afternoon to all of the Firstpost listeners.
What are the legal and diplomatic implications of President Trump's executive order accusing South Africa's black-led government of racial discrimination?
Alyson, I don't think that there are any legal implications when it comes to our democracy and our constitution as a whole, but there definitely are diplomatic implications with this accusation. We know that South Africa is part of the African Growth Opportunity Act, which means that any businesses that have any kind of interaction with the United States will be able to have this interaction on a fast-track basis. According to AGOA, we can have access to the US economy in terms of trade. That will definitely be on the line now that Donald Trump is president of the United States, and now that these executive orders have come out. So when that is up for renewal, I definitely do believe that South Africa will no longer be part of the Africa Growth Opportunity Act. What is also implemented is, as you mentioned in your introduction, is that we have no ambassador anymore. We have, of course, at the point in Mr. Jonas in order to replace Ibrahim Rasool. But now the problem is that will Mr. Jonas be allowed to enter into the United States as ambassador representing us with these diplomatic issues that we're currently having because of these accusations that have been labeled against us as a country we have yet to see. Also, the diplomatic issues with this is obviously because South Africa is going to be hosting the G20. Will Donald Trump and the United States be participating in the G20? He has implemented that. He said that he will not be doing that, but it still is yet to see whether or not the United States will have any semblance of representation in this G20 summit that is coming up. And also other implications such as PEPFAR being taken away and the devastating consequences that has had. Of course, here in our health sector, 17% of our health budgets comes from PEPFAR. So we are taking a hit, but it is not as bad as other countries such as Uganda, such as Lesotho, that do rely on PEPFAR a little bit more. And so we're seeing those HIV numbers starting to rise as well. So the implications rather of this US aid being cut and PEPFAR being cut is going to have far-reaching implications even after the Trump administration has done ruling the regime in the United States.
And Ayanda, how might this refugee policy impact racial dynamics and political discourse within South Africa, especially regarding the land reform policy and minority rights?
It's already begun. And this misinformation and disinformation campaign has started well before the Trump administration. If you look at 2018 and 2019, we had white-based interest groups going and speaking to the likes of Senator Ted Cruz, speaking about the so-called genocide that is taking place in South Africa. And I just want to state that even though it was said in the introduction, that there is no kind of genocide that is taking place in South Africa. We know what a genocide looks like. It is currently taking place in Gaza as we speak right now. There's no such thing that is taking place here in South Africa. But we know that what the implications of that misinformation and disinformation campaign has now reached the highest echelons of the White House, which has now resulted in refugee status and victimhood being given to a population that in South Africa is currently thriving. You said in your introduction that 70% of the land is owned by 7% of the population. But I also want to make sure that people understand that 8% so there's 40% unemployment in South Africa. When you look at those who are unemployed, majority of them are Black people. If you look at the population of those who are actually employed, the majority of people who are employed in this country are white, because unemployment amongst the white race amounts to 8%. These are facts that you can find on Statistics SA. What I'm trying to say is that these are going to have higher implications on the ways in which we deal with social cohesion, because we're currently still dealing with the effects of not only apartheid, but even before apartheid, with the project of colonialism, the land theft that took place, the loss of language, the loss of education, the loss of culture. We're still trying to get that back. And what this does is actually hamper on on our social cohesion project that we currently have here in South Africa, because of the vast differences that we currently have in our society, the inequality that exists, the schools and the differences between the schools that exist in provinces such as Gauteng and in the Western Cape, which were former rich countries, rich provinces, and if you look at the provinces such as Eastern Cape, in KZN, there was a former Bantustan. The schools that exist there are really, really harrowing, and the infrastructure is not equal. And so what we see is that this what's happening with the Trump administration is that they are sowing divisions of racial tension here in South Africa, and we need to reject it with the veracity in which it deserves.
Right. And what precedent does this set for US immigration policy? Could it open the door for other groups to claim refugee status based on similar grounds?
Sure about how it will have large implications on the US law as it stands, because currently they've stopped all of the other refugee programs except for the programs of the people who have a certain hue that look like a certain group of people. And so for them, the project of refugee status, of course, will continue. But for people who are from Syria, from Yemen, from Afghanistan, this will definitely have legal implications for them. Because then this means that do they also get to have the same refugee status that is being conferred onto these 49 white South Africans? Will they be able to have the same problems that these so-called 49 South Africans have? I don't think that is possible. If you're looking at the environment currently right now in the United States, law is taken as somewhat of a suggestion than actual law, which is why we have Donald Trump doing what it is that he is doing with such impunity. I mean, we have judges that are currently being arrested in the United States. We have students who are being yanked out of class and put into ICE vans and isolated in prisons just because of their right to protest. So currently, as it stands right now, I do not know what protections the refugee statuses are going to have. I do not know what the refugee status is going to look like for refugees when they are entering into the United States. But what I know is that these 49 people who are going to be entering into the United States are going to be changing the refugee system, because now there will be certain precedents that refugees within the country can lean on legally to say that these people were granted statehood and citizenry. What makes them different from me? So I think from that perspective, there definitely will be changes.
Yeah.
But on an international perspective, I highly doubt that. This is the USA once again moving against the current, moving against what is democratically correct and what is, for human rights, according to the Human Rights Charter of the United Nations, of the United Nations, especially when it comes to the treatment of refugees. They are sorely lacking. And what we're going to see is the implications of that moving forward as they become a pariah state.
And thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa. As always, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Shifting focus to Burkina Faso now, the junta leader Ibrahim Traoré has called for deeper ties with Russia. Ibrahim Traoré, the head of Burkina Faso's military-dominated government, was in Moscow over the weekend. He met Russian President Vladimir Putin after attending the Victory Day military parade held on the 9th of May at Red Square. Traoré said that he wants his country's relations with Russia to grow exponentially and to expand into new areas of cooperation. He clarified that he would not ask for military aid from Moscow while the Russian forces are engaged in Ukraine, but he urged Russia to share its knowledge, help educate Burkina Faso's young population, and to support efforts to end the jihadist conflict in the country. Traoré also praised Moscow's role on the global stage.
I think that with all the sanctions against Russia for some time, Russia has even developed an internal mechanism that puts it at the forefront of the international scene. And we are taking good notes of these lessons we have learned here.
Putin, for his part, highlighted the growing volume of trade between Russia and Burkina Faso. He noted Russia's ongoing humanitarian support, despite being under international sanctions. Putin said that Russia would continue to assist Burkina Faso by suppressing radical groups and training state officials.
Today, we are united by a common goal, the fight against terrorism and extremism. We will continue to assist the Republic in restoring legality and constitutional order, while contributing to the repression of radical groups that remain in certain regions of Burkina Faso.
Under Traoré, who seized power in a coup in September of 2022, Burkina Faso has moved away from its former colonial master, France, and has moved closer to Russia. Russia has reportedly sent military advisors and equipment, some linked to the Wagner Group, now rebranded as Africa Corps. Now, the Burkinabe military leadership views Russian assistance as crucial in combating jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel. Russia has also expanded its presence in Burkina Faso's mining sector, particularly in gold and uranium. Agreements have been signed for Russian companies to explore and extract mineral resources. There are also plans for infrastructure projects and potential cooperation in nuclear energy. Burkina Faso's turn toward Russia is part of a broader trend among military-led governments in the Sahel, including Mali and Niger. All three nations have withdrawn from the regional bloc ECOWAS and have formed the Alliance of Sahel States. The growing cooperation signals a strategic realignment away from traditional Western allies and toward alternative partnerships, be it military, economic, and ideological. And finally, from East Africa, where a familiar beat rises once more in Uganda's political symphony. Bobi Wine, the pop star turned opposition firebrand, has officially declared his return to the ballot. The 43-year-old, born Robert Kyagulanyi, he says that he will challenge President Yoweri Museveni in the upcoming 2026 election, scheduled for January. Though Museveni, who is now 80 years old, has not yet confirmed his bid, but all signs suggest that he will run again, extending a presidency that began in 1986. However, this is not their first clash. Wine first faced Museveni in 2021, and while he lost, he made sure it wasn't done quietly. He rejected the results, citing a storm of ballot stuffing, falsified counts, and brutal crackdowns. However, the government officials denied everything. But Wine isn't just chasing votes this time. He calls the election a fighting opportunity, where a stage to expose what he describes as a regime built on fear, force, and silence.
This will be a fighting opportunity to further undress and expose the regime and to further galvanize the people of Uganda to rise up and free themselves.
Now, that silence, he says, echoes far beyond Uganda's borders. He accused the Western governments of watching from the sidelines, doing business while Ugandan citizens suffer.
Some leaders in the West are complicit in our suffering. They are here to crack their business deals, and they don't care about human rights.
Though he did not name nations, but the message was sharp. He warned that values preached abroad mean little, if not practiced, in Africa.
If they were standing for the values that they profess, then they would be castigating all these gross human rights violations.
Now, Uganda, who is a key military partner in Somalia's fight against Al-Shabaab, is often praised for its counter-terrorism cooperation. But behind the praise, Wine says, lies pain. And his latest accusation hits close to home. Eddie Mutwe, a trusted bodyguard and senior figure in Wine's National Unity platform, disappeared without a trace. A week later, he was dragged into court. He was charged with robbery, but the real story, Wine says, lies in what happened before that appearance. Now, Mutwe, according to Wine, was tortured, electrocuted, waterboarded, and beaten. Even Uganda's justice minister admitted it appeared he had been mistreated. But then came a chilling twist. Muhoozi Kainerugaba, Museveni's son and the head of the military, allegedly bragged about keeping Mutwe locked in his basement and even called him his punching bag. Since the revelation, Uganda's police and military have gone silent. There have been no denials, no explanations, but just the sound of footsteps growing louder in the dark. As the nation prepares for another election, Wine says he is not just running for power, he is running for voices silenced, for freedom stolen, and for justice long delayed. If elected, he vows to restore civil liberties, to dismantle corruption, and hold those responsible for abuses accountable. So, as the rhythm of rebellion plays on, the stage is set, the curtain rises soon, and now the world waits to see, will the ballot box outsing the bullets, or will silence take the mic once again? And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.